Good evening and thank you for watching Eye on Africa with me, Yana Lee. These are your top headlines on the continent tonight. COVID-19 threatens food supplies in sub-Saharan Africa. The ongoing health crisis compounded by the economic slowdown. China denies that there's discrimination against Africans in its country. This after reports of students and businessmen being mistreated prompted African ambassadors to reach out to Beijing. And in Cameroon, face masks are now compulsory in public places, but they've become difficult to come by, especially in the capital, Yaoundé. More than half of humanity is living under some form of lockdown. Several African states have limited travel or closed schools. Many have opted for curfews, such as Burkina Faso. But these restrictions are making it difficult for some of the country's poorest residents to access water. Laurent Bersteke explains.
Waiting in line in the scorching heat to fill up a few jerry cans of water. In this suburb near Burkina Faso's capital, this ritual has become part of daily life for many residents, and things have gotten worse since the start of the coronavirus epidemic. March and April are the hottest months of the year in Burkina Faso, a period during which the country frequently experiences water shortages. In order to limit consumption, authorities decided to close so-called communal fountains during the day. But this year, a curfew imposed by the government to curb the spread of COVID-19 is preventing residents from going out at night. For many, the only option is to queue at a privately owned water tower like this one. Rahinatu Diasso and her 4 children have been waiting here for hours. She says they've even begun to ration water at home for fear of running out. Barely enough water to drink, and even less to adopt the sanitary guidelines recommended by the World Health Organization, like frequently washing one's hands and clothes to help ward off the coronavirus.
Now, water shortages aren't the only cause for concern. Activists warn food insecurity too is on the rise on the continent. The Food and Land Use Coalition fears transport will be disrupted and prices will rise. All of this as hundreds of millions of businesses worldwide have been ground to a halt because of COVID-19. This, of course, will affect the lives of those living in net food importing countries. To talk about these issues further, we can welcome Wanjira Matai to the show. She's the Vice President and Africa Director for the World Resources Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me dive right in, Wanjira. What needs to be done to ensure food security in Africa right now?
Well, we have immediate issues of ensuring that people have food and ensuring that the supply chain of food from the farms to people's homes is secured. And so, especially with mobility being curtailed with COVID-19, it's extremely important for us to ensure that the food supply continues locally. Equally important, a lot of countries on the continent rely on imported food. And so we must ensure that ports remain open and people are able to access food that is coming into the country, even as it's being distributed. So you have both the international supply chains, but also the local supply chains. We must ensure that farmers are still getting the seed and the inputs that they need to make sure that they're continuing to grow food. And then, of course, in the future, as we look forward in terms of future preparedness, we want to make sure that we continue to secure the landscapes that secure our food, vital, critical watershed areas in Africa that are the food baskets for many of where we live. So all of those things together, some very immediate, but some more long-term.
What are some of the places and communities in Africa that are most at risk right now?
I think one of the main places that are at risk are often very highly densely populated urban settlements, which are often very crowded, a lot of people in there. And the minute, for example, here in Kenya, we have curfews or we curtail movement, those are the first places to feel a lot of the pressure. And so that is especially where local loops and linkages and how we get the supply chains distributing food in those settlements must continue.
And other than food and water security, in your opinion, what else has COVID-19 affected?
Well, those are two of the major ones. But of course, livelihoods are at stake the minute that people lose the ability to work. As we work on ensuring containment of COVID-19, we also are finding that people are losing their jobs. And so job security and most of the social safety nets and social welfare systems that exist in other countries just don't exist here. So livelihoods in general are at risk. And of course, with that, water and food come with it.
And what would you like leaders to focus on post-crisis when all this is over to ensure that if something like this happens again, that the most vulnerable people will be better protected next time?
I think the most important is ensuring that we have resilient food systems, whether it's on the landscapes or in our own food storages. We need, especially now when we are seeing countries unable to move from one to another, people to move from one to another country, that we ensure that within a country, we can ensure food self-sufficiency. That is something that we're going to have to work on, and that's about building food systems and ensuring that the supply chains, the storage, the agricultural production, the resilience of the landscapes where food is coming from, the protection of watersheds where food is coming from, all of a sudden becomes an extremely important priority.
Wanjira Matai, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Wanjira Matai of the World Resources Institute. Now, Africans and the African diaspora have become victims of anti-foreigner sentiment in parts of China. Images of black people being refused service in restaurants and access to shopping centres have flooded social media. In the city of Guangzhou, some have even been evicted and forced to sleep on the streets. All of this due to irrational coronavirus fears. A group of African ambassadors warned Beijing of this growing phenomenon. China's foreign ministry has responded, denying that there's discrimination against Africans in the country. For more details, here's our Beijing correspondent, Charles Pellegrin.
These pictures have been making the rounds on social media since late last week. Pictures of Africans living in China, often in the southern city of Guangzhou and also in other parts of the country, who are seeing their access refused to restaurants or unable to book hotel rooms. Some others who are being evicted from their apartments and forced to sleep rough on the streets of the city. All of this is done in the name of epidemic prevention. Indeed, the country that was the first to be hit by COVID-19 is now afraid of a second wave of infections that would come by way of imported cases. This is something that authorities have never stopped repeating. What they don't often explain, though, is that 90% of those imported cases in the country have come by way of Chinese nationals. In addition to that, the country is actually, in effect, closed to foreigners since March 26th. African governments are at a loss to understand the situation and have summoned Chinese ambassadors throughout the continent to express their disapproval and anger. In response, China has responded by minimizing some of those allegations and even dismissing them. What's for sure is that China-Africa relations have now hit a new low.
Face masks are now mandatory in Cameroon. Monday was the first day the new rule came into force. If you're caught in public without one, you can now face a fine. It's the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to make them compulsory nationwide. France 24's correspondents in Yaoundé filed this report.
Of the capital, Cameroonians have a new look. As the coronavirus continues to spread, wearing a mask in public places has become obligatory. But this obligation is not respected to the letter. Most people waited until the last minute to purchase cheap masks.
C'est combien?
For a little less than €1, this vendor sells face masks made of local fabric. Homemade masks aren't always popular though.
C'est difficile. On dit 500, mais les clients ont de 200, 100 francs. Les clients aiment plus le blanc, que c'est un peu comme si c'était médical.
In the capital, surgical masks are in high demand, especially in pharmacies like this one. They are more efficient but more expensive than the homemade versions. Some clients still manage to purchase them. This pharmacy is already out of stock since government made the wearing of masks obligatory in Cameroon.
Depuis vendredi, les patients s'activent à ne demander que des masques. Ça fait partie de 40% de notre chiffre d'affaires actuellement. En attendant que la mesure du ministre de la Santé soit appliquée, nous avons un fournisseur agréé qui nous fait des masques lavables.
Wearing a mask is not yet a reflex for public transport users in Cameroon. Abel, a taxi driver, still has to educate his passengers because some even doubt the usefulness of the mask to curb the spread of the virus.
Depuis le matin, ce n'est pas facile avec les clients. Comme il y a certains clients qui ne sont pas encore habitués au port des masques. Mais ce que je rencontre depuis le matin, il y a ceux qui n'en ont pas. Mais je les demande, il faut aller acheter un port de masque.
The compulsory wearing of the mask is set to last 14 days. Time for the authorities to see if the measure has had an effect on the curve of contaminations of COVID-19.
That's it from me for now. Stay tuned for more right here on France 24.